muted myself. Tell us your class year and where you're living.
Me? Okay.
In the chat, share it in the chat. Put your
Great. Thank you.
class year, where you're currently living. If you want to share what hall you lived in, we'd love to see all those things. It's really fun to see who's here. We'll get started in just a minute. And at the very bottom, you'll see a little message that says type message here. Just add it there and hit send.
If you're on your phone, the chat is within the 3 little dots at the bottom of your screen.
Hi, Sissy.
And you can also rename yourself to include that info too.
Oh yeah, great point, Rena. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Chris. Nicole, how do I turn the camera around so my Mills shirt, like,
Oh, I don't know. Are you on the phone?
no, I'm on the computer.
You can see your shirt. Hi, Julia.
Mills. Is it backwards? No.
No, it's perfect.
Oh. Okay, great.
That's great.
All right, so we're up to 600.
I'm Jill. And hi, everyone.
Where's
Hi,
Peggy?
Jill. Hi, Peggy. Hi, Peggy. Hi, Peggy. Hi, Cece. It's Pat. Hi, Pat. Sweetie. Orchard Meadow forever, yay! It's your house. Oh, yay.
But did mine, I'm Jackie, did mine come up yet? This way? Did I come up yet, Jackie?
Probably. It's going pretty fast.
Okay, I'll type it again. You want to know who I am? I just unmuted myself.
Yeah. Jackie, I see you.
But you see me, but you...
There's Peggy. Yeah, share it in the chat, everyone. Add your name, class year, where you're currently living. Loving the Mills here. I see it.
Nicole, this is Maggie. Can I get a phone number that Albuquerque can call you? My sisters are in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and a sandstorm has disrupted their connection. And they would like to phone in. So do you have a phone number for Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Yeah, let me have Chelsea send that over to you, Maggie.
I would have certainly appreciated it. Thank you so much.
She can send it in the chat, so keep an eye out in the chat for that.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Yeah, and we'll get started in a sec. We have
Got my milk flag.
love it.
Everybody, I'm going to put in the chat all of these. Oh, okay. Oh, Rebecca got that question. Thank you. Rebecca's on my review, by the way, so kudos to her for helping us.
All right, so I think we could probably get started. Looks like we're already up to 600. We have a record turnout for tonight. So 15. So I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to mute themselves, please. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right. It was really great to see such a great turnout. So I'm going to go over just a quick welcome and some housekeeping. Know kind of the flow of tonight's program. So we, like I mentioned, have reached our capacity. So we registered over 1,000 people. Our Zoom capacity is 1,000, and so we are just fingers crossed that everyone can get in tonight. But do know that we are recording the event, and we are going to send it out to all alumni by the end of the week. The goal is to send it out by Thursday. So you'll get another copy of this. Friends who couldn't make it, please let them know. Rest assured they will get a copy of the recording very soon so that they can watch it as well. We're also going to share it in this month's Eucalyptus email newsletter. So if you missed the email this week, you can catch it in the newsletter that will go out on April 20th. So please remain on mute unless asked to unmute. I'd also like to encourage you to leave your videos on. We'd love to see your faces and see all of you who are here with us tonight. We have turned on the live transcription, but if you would like to turn it off on your display, you can do that at the bottom of your screen. Like I've mentioned before too, use the chat box, chat with one another, share who's here. We love seeing your class year, where you're currently living. If you want to include your residence hall or your major, whatever you want, please feel free to use the chat for that. For tonight's program, President Hillman will speak first, followed by Chair of the Board of Trustees, Katie Sanborn, who's the class of '83, And then Marilyn Schuster, class of 65, who is a trustee and the chair of the board's Academic and Student Experience Committee, will speak with Dr. Iwan Mance, Professor of Ethnic Studies and English, and Dean of Digital Learning and Innovation. They'll both speak about the Mills Institute. Following the presentations, we'll respond to questions that were gathered in advance from all of you. We received well over 275 questions, so obviously we cannot get through them all tonight, but we will try to answer as many as possible. And of course, many of you had some of the same questions, so we're going to try to cover as much information as we can through tonight's program. And lastly, I just wanted to note that this event was originally planned to be co-hosted by the ANC, but given the recent announcement and position of the Alumnae Association, the leadership of the Board of Governors felt it was best for the college to conduct this event on our own, but they've requested the floor for a few minutes at the end of the event for Governors Maila Granberry, class of 2005, and Alexa Pagonas, class of 1991, to just say a few words, and they have a couple of questions as well. And so we're happy to provide that space at the end and share the event with them. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to President Hillman.
Thank you, Nicole. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Nicole Adams, our Associate Vice President in the Office of Institutional Advancement, for all the work she's doing right now. She's in a pretty tough place, to be honest, trying to navigate different interests right now, and I really appreciate her work bringing everybody together. And Chelsea Edholm is with us too in our advancement office. Chelsea, thank you for your work too to support everybody. So Nicole, on your screen it might only be 18 pages, but on my smaller screen I'm at 27 and going up. So it's an awful lot of you out there. It's a great privilege to see so many people here on the Zoom. Before I start, I want to make a land acknowledgement, because though most of you are not with me on the Mills campus, I'm here on the campus of Mills College. We acknowledge the land and labor of the Alumnae people, whose connection to this land we remember and whose presence, past, present, and future, we respect. As part of Mills' mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and dissemination of knowledge, we acknowledge the land we're meeting on today is the original homeland of Alumnae people. So, as you know, I'm the president of Mills College. You also know Mills is a historic place of learning and creativity. You know that Mills has changed history, and Mills has changed lives. And now, in order to preserve Mills' mission, I have to tell the people who love Mills the most that I should be its last president. I know you have mixed reactions about this. Institution, most likely after 2023, pending further action by the Board of Trustees. I have my own reactions to this, as do our trustees, our students, our faculty, our staff, you, the graduates of Mills College, and many other neighbors and friends and supporters of Mills. I do want to make clear to you that there is no additional vote on this decision by the board until after we have listening sessions that are coming up. So there's been information about that out there. April 15th is not a vote when we anticipate the board will do anything further on this action, but we hear from people, which we scheduled for April 22nd. I believe this path that we're setting out is the best path forward for Mills, and I'm going to take some time today to share more with you about how we came to this decision and where Mills is right now. I think it's important that we made this decision while we still have the resources to support our community, and I'll explain about that. So a couple of things I just want to note before we dig into those details, realizing that you came for that information primarily. That is, the COVID pandemic continues to alter our campus dramatically. The pandemic has meant we have a very small residential population on campus right now, but the students who are here, I have to say they're wonderful. When I do have a chance to interact with them, they've worked incredibly hard, and our students are laboring through the pandemic right now in order to complete their semester in good order and keep on track towards their degrees. Our faculty and staff likewise have really rallied to support students in an almost entirely virtual environment right now. Commencement plans are underway. We've actually set up plans for a mostly virtual commencement using an exciting platform, which allows a lot of interaction and a lot more people actually to engage with the celebration of our students' accomplishments this spring. We'll also have a commencement to accompany that, where students will be able to come to the campus. And we're excited to allow that in-person interaction on the campus, and grateful that so far in Alameda County, the trends in terms of the pandemic have cooperated with our plan. Long cared about racial justice. And now Mills took the next step over the past year with its Board of Trustees leading the way, and also our faculty making a statement, our staff and the entire campus actually working to organize around becoming anti-racist. raising awareness of the inequities along race lines that have affected opportunities at Mills, that continue to affect opportunities at Mills, and that certainly affect our students, graduates, and community outside of Mills College. And I'm grateful for everyone who's invested in that process, and I recognize we have continued work to do, and I'm excited about the progress that we've made so far. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn to some slides I have. These are the same slides that we shared with the faculty and staff at a town hall last week in order to give everybody a shared understanding of where Mills is financially. So, Carrie, can you pull up those slides for me? Or Nicole, who's up? Thank you, Carrie, by the way. I appreciate your work in pulling these slides together and bringing them to the town hall today. So as you can see, the title here is a financial snapshot. It's a snapshot of a relatively long period of time, but it is a specific, it is particular parts of our financial situation. So I know you have a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer those, and I'll spend plenty of time on those too. But this is a sense overall of how we came to be where we are right now. First, our enrollment is a critical element to understand. Many of you have long supported Mills enrollment efforts to reach out to students, to recruit students, to support the students who are here on our campus, and then support the graduates as they head off into their careers. That enrollment challenge for Mills is a big part of where we are. The next thing I'll talk about is how that enrollment translates into operating losses. That is, declining enrollment means greater operating losses. I'll talk about the impact of Mills endowment and our particular cash struggles related to one-time measures that have mitigated some of those losses for us. And I'll close the fall semester headcount declined since 2010. So undergraduate enrollment is down more than a third. Graduate enrollment is down more than 40%. It's at 45 there. Overall, Mills enrollment decline is 40% since 2010. Okay, next slide. Another way to understand how Mills' mission has been realized and the students who we've been able to bring to Mills is to look at applications and enrollments. So Mills has, you can see this is a shorter period of time, but we listed these last 7 years or so for you, from 2014-15 to 2020 to 21. And you can see the significant decline, not only in enrollment, which was reflected on the previous slide, and there's applications, acceptances, and enrollment, and it's undergraduate and graduate here. This is for the fall, actually, so each fall. This isn't the entire student body. These are the students coming on campus in the fall. And you can see how significantly that's declined since 2014-15, the first year on this slide. Okay, next slide. How does this declining enrollment affect Mills' overall financial picture? Well, enrollment translates into revenue. It translates into mission for Mills too, and it affects our impact, honestly, but it also translates into revenues and the sustainability of the college's economic model. The net revenue from tuition and fees, to use a rough measure, is about $18,000 per student. The net revenue from residential students, in terms of room and board, is about $14,000 per student. So the lost revenue from this 40% decline is approximately $15 million annually. So it wouldn't be possible for Mills to face this with all the people who have loved Mills and worked hard at Mills. Here on the campus, our staff and faculty, and administration, as well as our trustees, as well as our alumni. All of the alums out there who have helped us, and the Alumni Association that has helped us, has helped to roll back some of the loss in enrollment that we would have experienced but for these initiatives. I can't speak to all of the initiatives over the period of time that Mills has seen declining enrollment. Mills has never quite hit its targets. So since 2016, we have reset our tuition. We reduced our tuition and the corresponding aid by 36% to translate the actual cost of a Mills education more effectively in hopes of increasing enrollment. That's an action you can only take once. For a long period of time anyway. You can't keep doing that essentially. Next thing we did, another thing you can really only do once, is to go test optional. Mills did this long before other institutions did. This is the year when everybody went test optional, to be honest, and it's resulting in the most chaotic admissions year ever because of the pandemic preventing so many students from having the ability to even take or sit for a standardized test. the entire academic universe, all of higher ed, it just about is test optional at this point, and many are test blind. Another enrollment initiative to try to reverse this decline in enrollment was a signature undergraduate experience, which was one of the measures that the AAMC generously helped support at Mills. This is an effort to actually focus particularly on the things that make Mills such a special experience for students and make them available to everybody, to package, in other words, the very best things about Mills and lift the floor for what Mills students experienced as undergraduates so that all would have access to those experiences. We also added new majors and programs, including an online master's in educational leadership. The online master's in educational leadership is another example of an initiative that would not have been possible but for the support of the AAMC. I think that I'm breaking up some. I'm getting a text about that. So, Nicole, are you hearing me okay right now?
You've been breaking up just a little bit. Maybe try turning your video off just for a little bit while we do the slides.
Sure. Okay. Let me know if that's better, Nicole, and I'll try to come back on the video later. Another thing that Mills did in order to part to or from Promise programs, meaning efforts to increase college going by first-generation students across the Bay Area, actually in many different cities. Mills has offered scholarships to those students and offered a leadership academy to those students as a bridge program. Mills has also added initiatives to attract Black, Indigenous, people of color, and first-generation college students across the Bay Area and beyond. Mills has offered transfer guarantees and has aligned with the California Independent College effort called Associate Degree Transfer, which allows more community college students to come to independent colleges and universities. And we've worked hard to build those guarantees. We actually have agreements with some 13 community colleges across California in order to make the pathway seamless from an undergraduate, from an associate's degree at a community college to an undergraduate degree at Mills. We also have been working with partners to try to increase the awareness of Mills programs and to the opportunities available to our students. We have co-branded pipelines to Mills graduate degrees with UC Berkeley. We have created a joint UC Berkeley Mills engineering program where students can spend 3 years at Mills and 2 years at Berkeley, have a degree from Mills and a degree from Berkeley. We have focused on local, in-state, and regional recruiting. I mentioned some of this already. The pathways from community colleges, that's 13 different memoranda of understanding that we worked out since 2016 with individual community colleges. And we've worked with all of the Promise programs. We've also engaged in select international recruiting, something that Mills has engaged with in different ways at different times over the years, relying on specific partners out there. We've expanded summer bridge programs not only for Promise students from the Oakland Promise and elsewhere, but for other students, because that improves the success rates of students in their undergraduate education. And we've added a bachelor's degree completion program, which specifically reaches out to students who had not finished their Mills degree, that had some credits towards their degree, who could come back to Mills and study in order to enhance their, in order to earn that degree that they hadn't finished yet. Am I still breaking up, Nicole?
No, you're sounding way better.
Okay. The next things that we did, it's not only efforts in enrollment, although efforts in enrollment have been at the centerpiece of what Mills has done to seek to roll back the decline in enrollment that is largely a result of national changes across higher education and structural shifts across our sector. We've also undertaken a huge number of other measures to try to restore our financial stability, and I'm going to speak to those that we've done since 2020 us to generate revenue to support our academic programs in our community. We have reduced operating expenses and instructional costs. We have reduced employee benefits and executive compensation. We have set out hiring freezes, except for critical positions. We have implemented campus sharing programs in order to share our campus with others, others who could take advantage of the spaces that we were not utilizing completely. And we worked to develop and optimize the uses of underutilized space, including looking at how to drive potential revenue to Mills academic programs. And finally, we explored partnerships that could actually help us with all of the different pieces that we're talking about here, the operating revenues, the potential in students and enrollment, and the ways in which we were using our campus and able to address our the needs of our academic programs. This is a slide that shows you the history of unrestricted operating losses from fiscal year 2003 to fiscal year 2020. So this shows you, and this is a chart that's in millions, and it's from our audited financial statements. It shows you how many years Mills has had a significant operating loss. Now, there are 2 years where Mills did not have an operating loss. And remember, the difference really between a nonprofit and a for-profit is that a for-profit distributes its profits potentially to those who are supporting it. But a nonprofit has to actually balance its budget so that it can meet its expenses and continue to run. People who work for nonprofits continue to, we need to pay everybody, we need to cover our expenses, we need to improve our buildings, we need to sustain our enterprise. You can see there are 2 years when there is actually a gain. That's because bequests and other cash revenues count in these. Mills undertook significant shifts of bequests that went into cover operating losses in that year, 2009. That was a lot of generous bequests actually that Mills received in that year that made a difference and that were put into the operating budget. And then you can see in 2020, we actually also had a positive result in our unrestricted operating losses. And that's largely because of the federal revenues that came in because of the COVID support, and also because of bequests that we used to offset other losses. Thank you. Okay, I want to stress that those losses that I just showed you are actually understated by one-time actions that we cannot repeat. And specifically, we have relied on those in recent years because we didn't have other unrestricted assets that we could use to cover our expenses. We've realized from the sale of campus assets since 2019 in order to continue students and community. Also, just since 2019, we've done what I showed you had happened before. We've used over $4 million in bequests to cover operations. Ordinarily, we would push those into the endowment to increase the endowed funds. And instead, we've actually had to use them to cover current operating costs. One of our challenges has been that the endowment hasn't grown at the rate that it would if we had maintained an above-market payout rate. 5% is generally accepted as the maximum sustainable endowment payout rate. We have been above that, and we've returned to above that in the pandemic because of the need for cash to cover our operating expenses. Eventually, we need to return that to a more standard rate. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the opportunity to continue to pay for it. The endowment needs to grow in order to cover the same expenses in the future that it covers now. So the endowment hasn't grown as much as it would otherwise because we have used bequests to cover operating expenses and because the payout rate has been above what the generally accepted maximum sustainable endowment payout rate is. So why now and where are we now? So that we have a cash challenge moving ahead, and this is something that institutions face at different points in time. Mills has historically relied on lines of credit to cover cash needs at different points in the year because the revenues that come in aren't consistent throughout the year. We ordinarily negotiate lines of credit. Our existing line of credit has been a 4-year line. It's reduced now to $5 million from $8 million 4 years ago, and it expires in March 2022. It's difficult to obtain new lines of credit when you have as many operating losses as Mills has had. Mills also has been supported by the AAMC. We owe the AAMC $2 million for a loan that it made in support of our students' signature undergraduate initiative and the online Masters in Educational Leadership. Based on the enrollment projections that we saw early this year, fiscal year 22 and future fiscal years were likely to generate continued multi-million-dollar operating deficits. The result is insufficient cash to continue existing operations into the future. So the consequences of the structural deficits. What does it matter that we've been running these kinds of deficits? I mentioned some of those consequences. And also mentioned that those deficits understate the reality of the difference between operating expenses and revenues. But for a campus like Mills, the deferred maintenance costs are very high. A campus that's not kept up to date does eventually result in very high costs. If we don't raise funds or take on debt to cover those costs, they eventually result in an inability to continue our operations. So right now we're facing rising future costs for campus maintenance, but we also face some current issues that we need to address in the short term that are not reflected in our budget and that we don't have the cash to pay for. Those include improvements that are required under the ADA to improve the accessibility of our campus. They include sewer lateral improvements that are required by the local authorities, East Bay Mud. And they also include air quality improvements that we need to make in our boilers. This is just one example of the compliance costs that we have to reckon with that we can't cover within our operating budgets when we're running at a deficit. Okay, I have chat. I guess the last slide there was questions, which we're going to get to a little bit later. I want to add a couple of other things. First, alumni have been very consequential in helping Mills with enrollment. Many of you out there are storied recruiters, and you have made a difference for Mills. And I know how much I know how much that matters to you. I just want to recognize that you make a tremendous difference because of your example and your success, your accomplishments in connecting to the people who could come to Mills. The enrollment challenge is a structural issue. It's true, every institution is in a different place, but the number of opportunities that are out there to continue to recruit students to the kinds of programs that Mills have, we have tried everything in the book that's out there. We have also worked to raise money to support all of these programs with as much vigor as possible. And we have worked to share with our community these challenges. I went back a few years to right before I came. So since I came to Mills, we have always been in financial struggle. Not a year after I arrived, we declared a financial emergency. And as soon as I arrived, we immediately made cuts. I was deciding on cuts before I even got to campus, when I was still had a different job and I was coming to Mills to try to figure this out. We made cuts just to bring our deficit under what our line of credit was for the year. And those were difficult cuts for our campus community to sustain. They involved reducing benefits. They involved reducing salaries in many instances. They involved changes that made it tough for the campus to continue to operate. We made those changes because we believed in Mills' mission. And we eventually declared a financial emergency to try to restructure in ways that we thought could help Mills continue to sustain itself into the future. In the years since that declaration of financial emergency, we regularly shared budget and financial information with all of the meetings that we had with all of our stakeholders. During the years before I got here, an average of, that is sort of 2014, 15, and 16, a message went out to the campus community on average about every week and a half about Mills' financial situation. Usually titled budget deficit, but sometimes titled different things. So this is a decision that's a long time coming, and a lot of information has been out there about it. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic. And the situation that Mills finds itself in right now is actually beginning to reckon with the reality that caring for our current students, staff, faculty, and mission is something that we need to change the way we're operating in order to sustain Mills into the future. I want to mention the conversations that we're having with Berkeley too. So Nicole, I realize I'm running a little bit long here. Should I talk a little bit more, or do you want me to start answering questions? It's up to you. I don't want to cut short the time that we have for questions, and I could go ahead and introduce Katie right.
I think if you want to speak for a few more minutes, and then we'll go right over to Katie.
All right, we're heading to the chair of our board of trustees shortly. So Katie, I'm just going to say a few words about UC Berkeley, and then I will shift over to you. So I want to acknowledge that many of you don't feel we shared enough about our financial situation. I recognize that's a challenging thing for people to hear. It's also something that causes us sometimes a competitive disadvantage in terms of recruiting and other activities of the college, including our relationships with partners and creditors. So this is a tricky balance, and we've sought to strike that. And we're certainly sharing as much as we can right now. The same information with you that we share with our staff and faculty. I realize you want to be heard more at this point. It's why we've set up listening sessions, so that on April 22nd, before there's any additional action on this path that we've set out, April 22nd, we'll have an opportunity for trustees to hear from everybody. I also want to say our conversations with UC Berkeley continue. And I am aware of this, of the interest out there in a UC Mills. I want you to know that we appreciate the effort to come up with creative solutions, and I'm very grateful for that. And we do continue to have. It would take multiple years, and it would have lots of cost implications. And honestly, we need to move quickly, and we need to find resources to support a sustainable Mills moving forward. We're longtime partners with UC Berkeley. We look forward to sharing more as things develop, and we have been forthright with our community about those conversations as they've continued. Okay, so why don't I pause there, and Nicole, I'm going to introduce Katie then. So Katie Sanborn is the chair of our Board of Trustees. I'm grateful for her accompanying us on this journey, and Mills has been fortunate to have her leadership during this time. Katie.
Thank you, Beth. I've been looking at the chats here, and I've been looking at your faces, and I honestly wanted to scroll through all 30 pages, but I was afraid I wasn't going to get back in time to be able to speak to you this way without looking like I don't know what I'm doing on Zoom. The board for the last 4.5 years. And what I wanted to talk to you about to you this evening was how the board is structured and how we came to this decision, and also just share with you a little bit of my own personal experience. I was talking with my brother-in-law the other day, and he's aware of what's happening to Mills at Mills and what we're looking at. I think of all the people who love their college, and anybody who loves her college more than you do. And I wanted to share that with you because Mills is a very special place to me, and it colors everything that I do and how I think as a trustee and how I lead our board. Our board has 25 voting members. 68% of us are alums, and that includes the AAMC elected alumna trustees. One of the things that's incredibly important to me is that all of the members of the board, all of the trustees, when we come together in that boardroom, we are equal. I do not distinguish between who's an alumna, who's not an alumna, who's coming from another background. I don't distinguish who came through the AAMC election process. I don't distinguish who has been on for 6 months or who's been on for multiple terms. And we have people that fall into both of those categories. When we sit down at that table, we wrestle with the issues that we're bringing forward to you this evening and that you've been reading about in these last weeks. So I just want you to know that we take all of this incredibly seriously. We represent a wide range of disciplines. We have people whose backgrounds are in finance, government, law, real estate, academia, nonprofits, marketing, and some other areas as well. We all love serving Mills. It doesn't matter whether we're coming as alums or whether we're coming from outside. I actually, some of our trustees who never attended Mills or never had family members attend Mills are some of our most passionate supporters of the college. So structurally, the way we work is we have a number of committees. The committees take on the college's matters, both from things that we have a fiduciary responsibility for through some strategic issues. So we look at things at academic and student success and finances and resources. We have an audit committee. We address external communications or external relationships, which includes philanthropy and working with partners outside of the college, whether it's in the Oakland community or elsewhere. And then we bring all the work that we have done as in our committees to the general board, the full board, for broad discussion about these topics. And then we take votes when it's required, and we take those things very, very seriously. It's hard to really explain it, but the board has come too lightly, and it certainly hasn't come overnight. As Beth pointed out, Mills, and you know this too, Mills has been struggling with this for decades. And we've come to the point that we realize that Mills, to sustain our mission and to try to carry on all of the things that we love and the mission that we have, it's time for us to pivot. And that pivot is to find a new path and do more investigation on all of these issues than we were doing before things got to this point and prior to the pandemic. So, one of the things I also want to leave with you again, just to underscore how much I personally care about Mills. My grandmother was over the moon that I was admitted to Mills and went to Mills. And after she passed away, I had an opportunity to establish an endowed scholarship in her name so that other students could experience what I experienced at Mills. And I know many of you have done that as well. So I speak to you not only as a trustee and not only as the chair of the board, but as a fellow alumna. And I also believe that this is our best path forward. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to our trustee and alumna, Marilyn Schuster, and our professor, Awan Mance, who will tell you a little bit more about the Mills Institute that we're envisioning. Marilyn?
Oh, okay. Awan and I are going to first introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm a Mills alumna, class of 65, and my experience at Mills really shaped my whole life. For 40 plus years, I was on the faculty at Smith College, and for 5 of those years, I served as provost and dean of the faculty. When I retired in 2015, I moved back to Oakland and was fortunate enough to become part of the board, a group of people who are really remarkable in their backgrounds and in their commitment to the college. And I'd like to before Awan introduces herself and talks about specifics of a process that we've developed to get maximum input on designing the Mills Institute, I'd like to take a minute to consider the broader context of higher education in this country. That we tend to see only where we are in our institutional place, but financial problems concerning the funding of higher education, especially in the private sector, and enrollment shifts because of changing demographics have had a profound effect on all colleges in this country. And COVID has just been the stress test that has been kind of the last blow for a lot of institutions across the country. Many colleges have closed altogether. They no longer exist in any shape or form. Many colleges have abandoned their mission and changed drastically who they are and what they do. I think that what Mills is deciding to do is actually quite an inspiring and interesting opportunity to continue the mission, to continue the values of Mills in a different institutional structure so that it will continue to exist and that it will continue to have an influence in higher education. So I just want to remind us that many, many things have been tried at Mills, many things have been tried elsewhere that we have learned from, but it's come to the point where we really have to be more creative, more visionary, and create new institutional structures. So Awan is going to tell you a little bit about the process that we've developed to reach out broadly and think deeply about how to define the Mills Institute to continue our mission.
Thank you. And I hope you can hear me okay. I've been having a little bit of sound trouble today. But my name is Awan Mance. I've been at Mills as a faculty member since fall of 1999. And I am in the English department in ethnic studies, and professor of English and ethnic studies. I specialize in 19th century African American literature, but I also am an artist and an illustrator, and I am also teaching digital drawing in the art department. And so I familiar faces. Hello, it's really great to see so many familiar folks. But of course, for a sad reason, but hopefully a hopeful reason as well, as we talk about this way that we are trying to advance the mission and preserve that in some way, shape, or form. I've been at Mills for.
Python, do you want to try turning your video off for a second? It might help.
Okay, is that better? And so, as someone who is not a Mills alum, but has been at Mills for an awfully long time, I understand, Marilyn and I both understand that Mills is close to the hearts of many people, and Mills faculty, students, the Oakland and Bay Bay Area communities have a deep investment in the meaning of this college. And so as we move forward, what we're engaging, Marilyn and I are engaging in, or at least we're leading a process in which the Mills community will help us shape the mission and the goal, or particularly, I suppose, the implementation of a Mills Institute and the vision for that institute. And so I just want to talk briefly about the vision process for that. We're going to put together small groups of alums, faculty, students, staff, and trustees to have in-depth, hour-long conversations with us about the design of the Mills Institute. And we're going to address questions like what have been the experiences that have been the most meaningful for you? What has been very special, and what has been most valuable for you in your Mills experience? And also, how would you like to see this institute continue the commitment of the college to advance gender and racial justice and women's leadership? Those questions, we're going to just engage, have some good conversations, and we realize, there are 700 plus people here today, and so we will not be able to speak individually with every part of every constituency, but we will be taking notes at all of these sessions, and we will be making those notes public so that everyone, all parts of the community, will be able to know, at least in some way, know what's happening, what's being discussed, what ideas are being thrown, put on the table with each constituency as we talk with different groups about what this Mills Institute should look like, what the design of this institute should be. We want to hear your thoughts and processes. We also have created, well, I won't say we, but the President's Office was kind enough to create an email address for the whole Mills community to share ideas about the institute as we move forward. We want an open process. We want input. We want your ideas as people who love this institution and care deeply about Mills.
I'll conclude with a couple of comments. As Alon said, and as Katie said also, the goal is to continue the mission in an institutional structure that can last and that will serve both Mills' legacy and also education going forward. So, this is an incredible opportunity for us to create something new.
Thank you, Awan. Thank you, Marilyn. All right. So we're going to dive into questions that came in during the registration process. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of questions to get through. We will try to take questions from the chat, but please hold those questions until the end. We want to focus on the Q&A, and then if we have time, we'll definitely try to answer, the questions that we can. So with that, Beth, most of these questions are for you, of course, and then I have a few questions for Marilyn and Awan as well, but I will just dive right in. So the first question that came in, what is the dollar amount to save Mills as an independent women's college? This would be the cost of bringing it out of the red and to keep it on steady ground for the future.
This is a tough number to estimate, Nicole, because it's based on so many different pieces. However, I'd say we need, according to estimates that others have made, that I have seen, and that are based on what we would need in order to be in a better place, we'd need $500 million to $1 billion.
Could a major fundraising campaign involving alumni enable the college to overcome its financial problems and keep Mills an independent women's college?
I want to be clear how grateful Mills is for all the support of its incredibly generous alumni, alums, and other donors out there. The financial situation facing Mills, though, is an ongoing structural operating deficit resulting in large part from declining revenues related to enrollment, and the critical need to invest significant money in repairing and upgrading the infrastructure that supports our academic operations. The financial issues that are facing Mills can't be solved by a fundraising campaign because they're based on what our current donor base is and how much we get, for instance, on a regular basis. Because they're not one-time occurrences, they're ongoing and they're fueled by the dramatic changes across higher education. let me just put out there, Nicole, one of the comparisons that people ask about this is what about Sweetbriar College? So Sweetbriar College did change its plans because of a fundraising campaign. Sweetbriar has about 12,000 living alums. They, on a regular basis, they get in unrestricted giving, they get between $5 million and $15 million every year in unrestricted gifts. Mills' unrestricted gifts have never hit $5 million. Our unrestricted gifts generally are gold each year, and I want to thank those of you who don't think Mills is fundraising. I can tell you they're working very hard to raise money, and I'm grateful for everybody who's working in our advancement office to do this. And they've worked very hard, and they've actually met their goal for unrestricted funds that they've raised this year, which are going right to support our operations and current students and our academic goals. And I couldn't be more grateful for everybody who's contributed to that. But there's just not the capacity in our donor base to actually raise enough money to do this. The challenge for us is just the extent of the need far outpaces the amount. The campaigns that we run have not been able to hit that. One of the differences between Mills and some of the other institutions that are out there is a difference in our endowment size. If we had 10 times our endowment, we would be in a much different financial place.
Thank you. What is
that rate is set each year by the Board of Trustees. It's subject to the rate based on the rate of inflation and other economic factors. The college's payout rate had been brought down to 5%. It was moved back up because of the financial pressures related to COVID-19. Came back up to 7%. So the board raised the payout rate from the endowment to 7%, as I put on the slide earlier, for the 3 fiscal years that we're in the midst of right now.
And this next question we get a lot, especially recently. What happens to the unspent endowment fund if the college does decide to suspend business as an accredited college? What input will we have if we begin and/or contributed to a fund?
So just to be clear, Mills is at the beginning of what we intend to have as a compassionate and meaningful transition process where we continue to support our students in the community as a degree granting college for, we hope, the next 2 years, perhaps longer. That's what our plan is. So to be clear, this is not a precipitous closure announcement, and we're not moving abruptly or too quickly before there's a chance to consider the decision. It is our hope that the endowed funds would continue to support a Mills Institute, and we're in the process of reviewing all of those. Once the Mills Institute design process is complete, we'll have a better sense of how the endowment will play a role in Mills' future. If you have an endowed fund or have contributed to an endowed fund, you should know that Mills will certainly notify you before making any changes or attempting to make any changes with respect to that fund. Your fund's purpose and administration may not change at all, depending on the specifics of the Mills Institute and on future institutional partnerships. And to be clear, it's not only Mills that intends to do this and absolutely wants to respect its donors and their wishes, but it's also because the law, the money that actually we receive as endowed funds can only be spent over a long period of time. There's a time restriction on that money. That's one reason we can't spend our endowment to cover current operating costs, because there's a time restriction on the spending of endowed funds. And the other restriction on endowed funds is purpose restriction. Endowed funds can only be spent for the purpose for which they were given to an institution. And that has to be respected moving forward too. We're bound to that, and we absolutely will do that. And that's what our advancement team has done and will continue to do through this transition.
Thank you. You already answered some of this question earlier, but again, for how long has enrollment at Mills fallen short of goal?
So there have been a significant shift in where students actually opt to enroll in recent years. There's increasing competition. The students that Mills has become actually extraordinarily good at serving well have more options than ever before. Because those students have so many more options, admissions is a very competitive space. One of the challenges that faces Mills in its enrollment climate is the financial challenges of the college itself. The Department of Education publishes a financial composite ratio every year. That is one of many indicators of whether a college is in distress. Like all indicators, it's an imperfect indicator. Just to give you a sense of how this has changed. Before 2015, the Department of Education never released those numbers. because they viewed it as a substantial competitive injury to those colleges and universities that had actually a number that suggested financial risk. There is a cascade of other numbers that are available today because so many colleges are at risk. Mills is acting before it is in so much risk that we're forced to act in precipitous ways by regulators and accreditors. By acting now, we have much more control over what happens next, and we're better able to support our community. So the enrollment challenges at Mills have created the revenue and the financial challenges, and it's largely because of changes across the entire sector of higher education, as well as Mills' specific financial situation.
So if there hadn't been a pandemic, would enrollment have been different?
Everything would have been different. If there hadn't been a pandemic, Nicole, enrollment definitely would have been different. This has had a big impact on everybody, and Mills suffered disproportionately in the downturn in enrollment this year. Some schools were able to gain enrollment. Many lost some. Mills lost significantly. So yes, the pandemic had a tremendous impact on enrollment, and that has a big impact on our judgment about what's best going into the future. Because remember, a downturn in enrollment for 1 year doesn't just affect us for 1 year. It's the years after as those students. If they're graduate students, not as many. If they're undergraduates, 4 years, 5 years, sometimes 6 years, as students work and meet their family obligations and study and earn their Mills degrees. So that downturn in enrollment that we had last year and that we see coming next year before we made any announcements, that's going to stay with us and make it impossible for us to continue to meet our expenses moving forward.
So given the uncertain future of the college, is Mills still recruiting prospective students?
Just today, we heard from a prospective student who was so excited about coming to Mills, a new first-year student, doesn't want to go anywhere else. We are communicating. They know exactly what's happening on the campus right now. We have communicated to all of our students what they can expect, and we're working to give them more details so they actually know exactly what their options are. We want as many students as possible to earn their degrees at Mills. That's the advantage of actually taking this step before we're on the edge of a cliff. We actually want to be able to support our students and community, including the prospective students who join us. Some students they pursue short-term graduate degrees. With what we anticipate as the timeline ahead, there's plenty of time for those students to earn degrees. The students who aren't on those faster timelines, we're looking at the best transfer pathways for them. We're in active conversation with many institutions to actually enable them to have a streamlined transfer process. And we're communicating with individual students. There's not one student pathway through this. There's not one type of student at Mills. There's so many different types of students. Some can accelerate their degrees, and we're working to raise support around that. And honestly, Nicole, that's what I hope people will help us do here. We need to support our current students so they can earn their degrees, so they can leave Mills with a degree they came here to earn. Many of them will be able to do that with support around an accelerated pathway. And that's the kind of thing that we could use support to help.
Excellent. And I'll just add to, earlier today, BG Nakapama from the AANC, she and I met with staff over at the Office of Admissions, and they still do want alumni to be involved. It might not look the same as you've been involved with that office in the past, but they are still recruiting students and love to be able to connect alumni to students to hear more about the Mills experience, what to expect at Mills, and especially now as students who are incoming to Mills, will likely be here for 2 years. If you were a transfer student who came into Mills partway through your education, or if you transferred out to go to another institution, and if you're interested in talking to students who might have that same experience, we would love to have your help. I'll drop the email address in the chat for Diana Martinez, who over in the Office of Admissions is the person to contact. But there are still ways for you to be involved in those efforts. And unfortunately, college fairs aren't happening right now. Everything's digital. But do, trust that they are going to all sorts of digital college fairs and meeting with counselors and staff, especially community colleges in the Bay Area. There's a lot of work being done there too. And we have agreements in place. But I'll drop Diana's email in the chat and encourage anyone who wants to be involved to reach out. So let's see, next question here. What transition options will exist for undergraduate students, especially for the class of 2024 and 2025?
So I think I talked a little bit about this, that we're working on individualized pathways for students depending on their program and depending on where they are, how advanced they are in terms of the number of credits that they've earned towards the degree in that particular program. Our admissions team Our enrollment management team has now turned towards that kind of intensive individualized support for our students, working with partners to build those pathways. Many students will be able to finish at Mills, and some will not. There are other questions about the length of time. The length of time is based on the financial challenges that Mills faced and our requirement that we support our community. There's plenty of room to disagree on different paths forward. There's not room to disagree on Mills' financial state. Mills faces a situation that it has to reckon with in terms of its ability to continue to support its community. And that's the pathway that the board will consider as we work with our accreditors, who we also have to move together with to support our current students through their degree goals.
And how about for graduate students who are accepted to the fall 21 cohort?
So the same option. We'll develop transfer agreements with peer institutions. Some students will be able to finish at Mills. Some students will opt not to, will choose not to. We've actually had relatively few students work to transfer so far, but we're going to work with everybody to see what the best outcome is for them so that we can support their goal. For those students who graduate, that's a success for Mills College.
Excellent. And you touched on this earlier too, but a question about Berkeley. What stage are negotiations with Berkeley currently?
We don't have lots of details yet. We do know they are not willing to consider a UC Mills proposal.
How long has this plan been in place prior to the conversations with Berkeley, I believe?
We've been working with Berkeley for years. Cyrus and Susan Mills founded Mills at the same time that Berkeley was being founded, when an independent college became the University of California, and they were contemporaries of the founders of the University of California. But Mills has been considering options with respect to, and Nicole, do you mean conversations with Berkeley or conversations about the Mills timeline in terms of degrees? But the Berkeley plan is honestly, to the extent it's a plan, I mean, it's an opportunity for Mills, it's an opportunity for Berkeley, and we've been pursuing that in earnest for the last year approximately, with conversations and exploratory discussions with faculty, with staff, with administrators, and in terms of the decision around Mills' finances and whether Mills could continue to grant degrees, that's been a long time coming, but honestly, the plan about what to do now is still being developed. As you know, we've opened the doors to what this process is before we have everything wrapped up in order to get community engagement and in order to support our current students, putting their needs at the top of our list so that they know what to expect moving forward. And that is a step that the board took after seeing the enrollment numbers for next year. So the Berkeley, a long time, the possibility for a long time, the current plan about Mills shifting away from being degree granting and towards becoming an institute to pursue elements of its mission in a different way, that's recent months.
And how can alumni help Mills in this period?
The best way to help us is continue doing what you've long done. Support our students, support our faculty, ask questions. I can't possibly keep up with all the questions in the chat, so I realize you're doing that despite my not paying attention to all of it, and I'm sorry about that. There are lots of things that contribute to Mills' value in the world and Mills' mission and its impact, and what you do are at the top of the list of those things. I also need your help in designing a Mills Institute. You heard from Marilyn and Awan, two brilliant professors who love Mills, know lots about Mills, actually can pull together these ideas and help us build a creative Mills Institute. And we need to support our current students because they need your help more than ever.
Okay, and this next question, I promise I did not plant this one. It's a good one though, so thank you to the person who asked it. Should we continue making gifts to Mills? Why? For how long? And should we be encouraging others to do so?
Nicole, top of the pandemic, which has disrupted their educational plans as much as anything in their lifetimes. As we design and launch the Mills Institute, your ideas and your support will make a tremendous difference to the success of that vision.
So what do you or the college
relationships are what make things happen in the world, honestly, and we've had, since I've come to Mills, we've had a positive relationship with the AAMC, and I know our Office of Institutional Advancement has really valued that, and I want a relationship. The Mills College needs a relationship with the AAMC where we can work together to help Mills continue to sustain its mission, albeit in a different way, and to support our current students, staff, faculty, community, and alumni as we actually work through this transition together.
So So why was the choice to make Mills co-ed not pursued?
So many of you would have many answers to what we ought to do around that, and I've talked to, unlike what I said about Mills' financial reality is a reality. It's simply a fact. It is the truth. There's no real opinions related to that. But the question about whether Mills should shift its admissions practices with respect to the gender of undergraduate applicants, that is something on which people have many opinions. For me personally, I have not thought since I came to Mills that actually opening undergraduate admission to all genders would have resolved Mills' challenges because of the structural changes across higher education, because of Mills' mission, and because of the specifically the enrollment challenges of other all-gender small colleges. So that's why we haven't done that in recent years. You all can tell me more about why that has or hasn't happened in the past.
Great, and now some questions about the transition. How will staff and faculty be supported during the transition?
So our goal in this is to get the best possible outcomes in terms of employment and opportunities for our staff and faculty. I can tell you that many staff and faculty are dramatically expanding their skill sets right now because all of us are still doing our regular jobs, or still be doing a bunch of different jobs, and are dealing with more complex communications challenges than any of us had dealt with before. So our staff and faculty are worth the investment that we're making by taking this step now before there's a dramatic action that would not allow us to build those pathways. So we intend to continue to support our faculty and staff through this transition, to build new employment opportunities through potential partners, and to continue to consult them and support their professional development throughout this transition.
And quite a few people asked this question. How will this transition affect my degree, and how will we access transcripts?
Every graduate of Mills received their degree from an accredited college. That will never change, and your accomplishment will always be there. The education that you received and the credential that you earned, the perceived value of your degree, it's all still there. Our accreditation is in good shape, actually. That's one reason we're in good shape moving forward, actually. Our compliance, it's all in good shape. We're in a positive place there, and the high level of academic offerings that Mills offers was validated in a recent accreditation cycle. Current students and alumni who attended Mills in 2000 or later can print an unofficial transcript at any time. You can use the resource portal. I'm sure our alumni relations team can help you with that if you don't know how to do it. You also can get unofficial or official transcripts through Mills or through a transcript clearinghouse. For official transcripts, we've authorized this clearinghouse, the National Student Clearinghouse, to accept the online orders for official transcript. This is in place now, and it will not change. Even if there's whatever changes there are at Mills in the future, that won't change.
Great. What actions can and will be done to ensure that Mills alums are able to connect with each other during and after this transition?
So our team in advancement wants to make that possible. I know the AAMC does too, and we'll continue to support ways for alums to connect to each other. That is something that we anticipate is of concern for us as we consider what will sustain Mills' mission into the future, and we fully expect to have those conversations with alums and with others about the design of the Mills Institute when that time is right. We want to offer the same high level of engagement. We also see student success as a central goal of that is what Marilyn described, improving the equity and educational outcomes for populations that have been underserved by higher education as currently constructed. We fully expect that alums would be able to continue to connect with students potentially through activities of the Institute, and we look forward to more conversations as we figure that out.
Excellent. So I'm going to give you a break for a sec because this next question I'll answer. It's about reunion, which I think everyone knows how much I love. What will Mills reunions look like going forward? So we are definitely committed to continuing to work with alumni, to work with the AAMC, to find ways to have reunion and other events on campus to keep you all connected. We know how important that is, and it's important to us too. So the plan for Reunion 2021, which is coming up in the fall, is as we've already kind of described. We're setting forward with a hybrid model where we are bringing back a limited number of alums because based on our current restrictions for our county and the campus, we can't invite everyone back, unfortunately, and as much as we want to. It killed us to not have a reunion last year. We look forward to it every year and just power through to make it happen. So this year we're planning a hybrid model, so we're inviting back the classes celebrating their 50th, and bringing also back the class from last year, so class of 1970, 1971, are invited to come to campus, as well as the 25th reunion, which is another big milestone. So the class of 95 and the class of 1996. And so there'll be kind of a limited options for, campus events, but we do hope to have the class dinners and other ways for you all to engage with the campus, some tours of some important spaces, visits to the art museum, and then we're also planning a slew of events to be hosted online, just like we have this one. So we'll have some virtual events for anyone, even if you're not celebrating a reunion, you're welcome to attend those. And as we get closer to September and as restrictions are hopefully lifted and the campus restrictions are lifted, we will definitely be inviting more alums back to campus. We want to make that happen, but we just have to be careful in our planning. But we have all sorts of different plans and operations sketched out to see, what that would look like. And as soon as restrictions are lifted, we will do our best to make it happen. And I think Chelsea was just telling me today that even Gavin Newsom was saying that restrictions are going to be lifted in June and only down to wearing masks. So fingers crossed. And at that point, if that happens, we'll shift and let everyone know. But save the date will go out next week. So please keep an eye out on that. But then also there's other ways to stay connected and engage with the campus. You'll see we've been sending out more opportunities for virtual events with faculty. There's a great conference happening just this week. Being run by the Center for Transformative Action. It is free and they have over 70 presenters, many of whom are alums, and I would really encourage you to attend that event. I'll put a link to it in the chat so you can go check it out later. And then we also are doing other virtual events to celebrate students, like the Phenomenal Women of Color event, which is coming up next week. And there are some other really great events as well. So I'll include a link to our event page in the chat too. All right. Beth, let me see. Yep. Hard questions. Back to you. So how will you protect the land and the buildings? What will happen to the art museum, the library, the residence halls, and the many other important buildings and spaces on campus?
Because Mills is continuing its academic functions through at least the spring of 2023, we expect these resources will continue to be utilized by our community and in support of our mission. As we engage in discussions with potential partners, we'll work to preserve mission-aligned uses of the campus facilities that a Mills Institute would use potentially. So we'll keep our community apprised and our partners across Oakland as well informed as these plans evolve and as details emerge.
Excellent. And let's see, will the pool remain open to the Greater Mills community?
We look forward to reopening the pool as Alameda County has turned orange, but actually it's not going to be orange anymore. That's changing again, so the colors are going away. But we are working to get the pool open to the community, and I have heard those of you who are anxious for that to happen.
Let's see here. How will the decision to transition to an institute or integrate with Berkeley impact Star King School for the Ministry, which has now made the Mills campus its home?
So we've been in conversation with all of our campus partners during Mills transition, and we'll share more as Mills College's plans evolve and as their own plans evolve too.
All right, Marilyn and Alon, I have a few questions for you about the Institute. What definitive subjects or skills do you plan to offer to someone attending a Mills Institute? Will students be qualified for graduate school?
I think that it's important to remember the process that we've set up. The Institute hasn't been defined yet. We have governing goals. We have a sense of that we do want to continue the Mills mission, but we really want to plan this together, and I really want to make a plea with you to help us think this through, to help us define this as the Mills Institute. There are a lot of institutes in this country. Some of them can serve as models. We're looking at a lot of them, but we can really create something new. I think what is important to remember again is that the pandemic has made clear what was happening all along, but we didn't see as clearly, which is that our current institutional structures aren't working. When they're working, they're not working well. They're not working well enough toward achieving equity in higher education, for example. That's why it's exciting to be able to think about creating a new structure, a new kind of institute that can serve students, that can serve the growth of knowledge, that can continue Mills values. So I know it's awfully hard. I'm grieving the loss of the Mills College that I knew all those years ago. But I also think that we can move forward and do something very positive and very forward-looking if we only work together. So please have patience and have imagination. Give us some ideas.
So as an institution, will Mills focus on solely serving women and girls, or is there an opportunity for males to also benefit from the institution and its mission? Will the Institute have a specific space, course, or missions for Black women?
I think that's a great question. I think all of those are great questions, and I do want to emphasize what Marilyn was just mentioning, that we're engaging in a process that involves the Mills community. So when we have our sit-downs, our hour-long sessions with different constituencies, we're going to be taking extensive notes. We're also looking to other models, some models that call themselves institutes, some that do not, that will enable us to best serve our mission. There are many institutes and many institutions, not all of them, I would dare say most of them do not necessarily serve the specifics of what we were just speaking of, gender and racial justice and women's leadership. However we forge ahead, those are core values of the institution.
And you touched on this a little bit, but what is the timeline and what will the Mills College to Mills Institute change process look like?
Is that one for me, Nicole?
Whoever wants to chime in.
Go ahead, Marilyn. Do you want to take this one?
Well, there are going to be several steps along the way. We're going to do a lot of deep thinking with small groups of people representing all of the aspects of the Mills community over the next month and a half. We hope to have a definition of a mission and at least the scaffolding of programming for the first iteration of the Institute by the end of May. And it's so important that you send in your ideas, that you help us think this through, and think of what it can accomplish going forward.
Great. And then last question about the Institute. Will the tradition of service, which has been such an important part of women's education, be continued?
And I will respond to that. Community engagement has been an integral part of Mills, certainly in the 20 years that I've been here, and has been a long time part of Mills and the way that it engages its students and Oakland. We are interested in working with you to develop an institute that reflects the values and the priorities and the way that Mills has been in the world for its students and for the surrounding community. And so, although, we're engaging in a process. We want to build this with the Mills community. We certainly recognize that community engagement, also, service, another way of saying that in many respects, is an integral part of how Mills has defined itself and has been the core part of Mills' experience.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for the questions, too. These questions literally came from the registration process, so I want to thank you again for submitting them.
Alumni Association. We have a couple of brief statements prepared for the college trustees. For those alum that have not seen it, we sent out a
part of Berkeley when the idea was to keep Mills as a college. It was certainly better than selling the campus off for parts, because that would have been and remains unacceptable. In December, Beth told the Board of Governors that things with Berkeley were still being discussed and that decisions would not be made until 2023. Somehow things changed and sped up, and they sped up so fast that Beth forgot to inform us to the changes in violation of the Memorandum of Collaboration. We were stunned by the announcement on March 17th. And since then, we have been perplexed and confused by the conflicting statements. Nothing's settled, and yet we know for sure we won't be granting degrees. There will be an institute, but the blueprints for it haven't been written. We may or may not have a partnership with UC Berkeley, but there's some type of agreement for which there is a term sheet. No one has told us how we got from a nice residential college scenario to a non-degree granting institute. And when we have asked, we have been given vague and diffusive answers. And yet we're in a rush. The Board of Governors have been told we can't even meet with the trustees. We have no idea what that means. We used to get together and have dinner. Now, when the very mission of the college is changing, we are told we can't have a conversation with each other. And I'm sorry, tonight, asking for our help with admissions, when we have literally been begging for years to be involved in a meaningful way, is quite frankly insulting. This past Sunday, on Easter, Marilyn Schuster invited governors to meet with her to hear about the Institute. We were told the writing of the blueprint was just beginning, just like we heard tonight. We had a chance, however, to ask questions. I asked if we were keeping the campus, parts of the campus, any part of 5000 MacArthur Boulevard. And she answered, presumably, yes. It depends on the assets we have. When we can't do it alone, we certainly can define the core and continue negotiations with that in mind. And then it suddenly dawned on me. One could have an institute and sell the college off for parts. And that would make for a very rich institute. Indeed, $1 billion institute. Which makes sense now why the questions are going around of, do we sell the rare books, do we sell the art collection, the music department, or just the land? So again, I'm giving this to all of our trustees that are listening tonight. Trustees, I urge you to search your heart and your conscience. Have you truly considered the alternatives and explored other models? Have all options been contemplated? Why can't the Institute grant degrees? And if we have enough money for a very, very rich institute, why could you not leverage the same assets to keep a smaller college? Trustees, are you sure your trust has been placed correctly? These are rhetorical for you to contemplate as you decide whether or not to extinguish the fires of wisdom. But please remember who you are and what you represent. And I do have one question, and it is for Katie. Katie Sanborn, as the chair of the Board of Trustees and an alumna, have you personally seen the term sheet, and will you share it?
Sorry, Alexa, I was looking for my mouse. It was on my other screen. It's hard to answer a question that doesn't provide correct information, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Maila.
Thank you, Alexa.
Beth might have some closing
Thank you,
remarks.
Alexa.
Thank you, Alexa. Katie Sanborn alums deserve better.
Sanborn, and I have no standing.
I think it says everything that the president and Katie Sanborn have left.
Answer the question. Answer the question. Answer the question. If we can't question correctly, can't even get the information.
Answer the question, Katie.
Answer it. If we can't answer it, ask
They
the
didn't
question
stick
in
around.
a way.
They left. The board needs to review we heard the answer.
The AMC is not
We
done.
will see you
The
in court.
AMC is not done. The AMC will
He
continue
needs
to
to
fight.
See you in court.
resign.
Donate
Resign
Now, so what is the plan? We do not know the plan.
Somebody ask what the plan is. Somebody ask what's the plan.
What is What is our plan? There's no plan.
There isn't. The AMC has retained an attorney, a very powerful, very, very powerful law firm, and we are very hopeful in the pathway that is going to be gone. I would love to give more, but I've been advised not to do that because there are people listening. There are people are here.
The wrong people listening.
When do we start our meeting?
Please give your money to the AMC.
Very big pocket.
AMC should get your
Alexa,
money.
I am so proud of you.
Yes.
But it was the
I know that voice. I know that
Proud
voice.
to know you.
Thank you, Carol. That means a lot.
Alexa, what is
Thank you, Alexa, for telling it like it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.